Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we will start shortly. I'm just waiting for everyone to come back from lunch. And the next panel will be on the changing face of foreign direct investment, challenges and opportunities. I will just make a short summary. And I want to also remind you, for our dear speakers and sponsors, and for our Platinum VIP guests, there will be a boat at 7:30 p.m. that's going to be leaving from Demtur Avrasya port, and you are all welcomed there. So shortly we will be starting with our panel discussion. We'll be discussing of the current needs and forecasts for international business relocations and the cooperative approach being adopted internationally to ensure that support is available when needed for businesses already invested in Ukraine and in the region. What are the changes being seen in investor confidence, and how are the government IPAs overcoming these challenges will be one of our subjects. How different government IPAs are supporting temporary business relocations, maintaining an eye towards a future return and rebuilding effort, rather than a permanent absorption of Ukrainian firms and talent by host countries. Identifying and promoting new investment opportunities, particularly where the global community is seeing production service shortages. And I want to also introduce shortly our speakers. Invest Bulgaria Executive Director, Mr. Bogdan Bogdanov, will be with us. From Investment and Development Agency of Latvia, Deputy Director in charge of export, Iveta Struvkaya, will be with us. And from Czech Investment, Director of Investment and Foreign Operations, Eva Jungmanova, will be with us. From Invest Moldova, Director General Mr. Selin Manik will be with us. From IDA Ireland, Global Head of Strategy, Policy and International Financial Services, Mr. Kieran Dono will be with us. And from Ukraine Invest, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Sergey Surfkaj will be with us, but he will be connecting online. I want to just inform that he's also now with the Ukrainian army, so he's not in office, but he will try to join us, and we are hoping that we will be. Oh, I'm sorry. Hello. So this is good news, and I want to welcome also Mr. Sergey Surkaj, and then also for Estonian Business and Innovation Agency, Head of Exports Advisor Team, Mr. Sven Orlik is with us. And finally, I will be calling on stage our moderator and also Managing Director of Germany Trade and Invest and Chair of OECD Network of Investment Promotion Agencies, Mr. Achim Hartig, please. Maybe some energy to rise. This is one of our most important panels. Yes, so I'll be handing this microphone over to you, Mr. Achim. And the second microphone for our speakers. Maybe I'll, yes. Thank you. So we have, we are quite flexible, but we have 1 hour, 30 minutes, and I'm here if you need.
Well, thank you very much, Boja. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to see you all here, and there's probably a fairly amount of people watching online today, and it's a pleasure because the subject is important, which we are discussing today, the economic impacts of the war in Ukraine. And today and right now we will be talking about foreign direct investments and how far they are affected in adjacent countries. I have the pleasure to moderate this panel here. First of all, it's after lunch, and we all know how we feel after lunch. And probably there would be some humor indicated to freshen up the atmosphere, but they put a German as a moderator, so you cannot expect much here. Still, I'll try to fill you with some content about what's going on in the foreign direct investment section in these different countries. So, foreign direct investments are part not only my understanding of stabilization of political bonds and economical bonds. If you invest in a country, be it greenfield or brownfield, you do mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, you always have relation-specific assets in that country and vice versa. By doing that, you mitigate risks in your own country, and you also create bonds between two countries. These bonds stabilize. And now it's the interesting question in how far the stabilization of bonds is something which is deteriorated throughout through the war in the Ukraine, and also in how far these bonds can be changed, can be adapted to the new situation so they can help Ukraine to rebuild and stabilize their economy. I would like to start with introducing the panelists, and would like to ask each panelist to give a short introductory statement. I would like to start with Iveta Strupkaya, Deputy Director in charge of Export, Investment and Development of the Agency of Latvia. Mrs. Strupkaya, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Excellencies, entrepreneurs, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank organizers and volunteers for organizing this great event, and of course for having me as a panelist. And yeah, maybe before I describe economic situation and the challenges we face and changes since the process of attracting investment, I would like to say a few words about the agency I represent. Despite the name, the Investment and Development Agency of Latvia, we don't have only one function, attraction of investment. Actually, the second function is promotion of export, including tourism, and we also we are also responsible for coordination of the creation of a unified state image. And what else? We have a representative office in Ukraine. Currently, colleague is working from Riga. And as you see, we don't complain about lack of work. Just like other countries and the whole global economy, we haven't been able to completely avoid the impact of the irresponsible actions of Vladimir Putin's Russia by invading Ukraine again and waging a full-scale war. And let's say, once upon a time, Latvia has been one of the countries that has proved its resilience by achieving quick recovery after COVID-19 pandemic. It reached 4.7 growth in 2021 after only a minor recession in 2020. Meanwhile, export growth in 2021 reached almost 24% compared to 2020. And the cumulative FDI reached a record of 21 billion euros in 2021, with Sweden and Germany being among top 5 sources of FDI. The forecasted FDI growth for this year has been set at 2.9%, which means slower recovery but not recession. And in these challenging times, we continue working with potential investors and keep presenting Latvia as a safe and attractive place for investment. And yeah, if we are talking about Latvia, Latvia is a diverse, digitally advanced and cost-efficient country, which is a part of the European Union and North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Latvia is the most startup-friendly country in the world, as stated by Index Venture in 2021. And we have the largest share, 45% of women in management in the EU. We have more than 120 government services available remotely, and we offer digital ID for signing documents. And currently, there are 6 smart sectors which interest us at most. These are biomedicine, bioeconomy, smart energy, smart materials, photonics, ICT, and smart city. And to promote investment that would lead the development of our country in desirable direction, we have introduced large-scale financial support for value-added projects. We are offering a range of incentives for upskilling, training, development, knowledge transfer, management, education, and also we are providing so-called green corridor that is fast-track procedures for smart investment and support for innovations. And if we are talking about previous year, we were doing pretty well. In 2021, Investment and Development Agency of Latvia has attracted more than 643 million euros or 32 new investment projects in already mentioned smart sectors. I believe that we have adapted to changes and are determined to be responsive to future challenges. And of course, we are working very closely with colleagues from Ukraine, realizing different investment projects in both countries. Currently, in our pipeline, there are 3 projects from Ukraine, and I believe that we will work on them very fastly, quickly, and effectively. Thank you.
Mr. Rupkaya, thank you very much. It's interesting to hear that especially the diversity in the terms of the digital economy helps a lot, of course, to become resilient and to give a lot of dots to connect also for other economies to do business with. As next panelist, I would like to ask Stelian Manik to give his introductory statement. Stelian, please.
Just a second. Yeah, thank you very much. Just a short introduction about the Invest Moldova. So probably many of you know that 1 year ago we got a new government, probably the first government during the independence of this small country during the 30 years. That is a really pro-Westic government that is involved in a very deep transformation and reforms of the country. So the agency is responsible for, of course, investment attraction, investment protection. It has the mandate of export promotion and country brand promotion. I will just try to be very brief. Moldova is a really small country, but it could be a very good bridge between the East and the West. So it's so small that even today, one of friend, a speaker from Ukraine, missed to mention the Western countries, Western neighbors, missed to mention Moldova. So, well, that means that we have a lot to work about the image or country brand of Moldova. So, why Moldova today can be a real bridge between East and West? Moldova has a free trade agreement with European Union, has free trade agreement with Baltic countries, Turkey, and also is still a part of former Soviet Union country, CSI, which means that actually if you produce something in the Republic of Moldova, you easily can export those goods 1,000 kilometers to the east and 1,000 kilometers to the west. So, as I promised, I'm going to be very brief. Today, we go through, Moldova go through a very deep transformation, and today the Invest Moldova as well is trying to get a new face. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to ask Eva Yomanova, Director of Investment and Foreign Operations of Czech Invest, to give her introductory statement. Eva, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm very honored to be here today with you to discuss such an important topic. And also, I'm very honored to be here on behalf of the Czech Republic, which is currently probably most important country in the European Union, as we have the EU presidency for the next 6 months. So we are going to coordinate all the talks and discussions and working groups on most important topics as Ukraine, energy crisis, transformation of economy, and so on. So let me just briefly introduce Czech Invest. I'm really happy that I can also meet my colleague from other countries, because it's always great to share best practices, same experience. And I have to say we are a little bit different than other investment promotion agency, because most of them, they also focus on export, where we have another agency for export. But Czech Invest is more moving towards innovation, and we have also big department to support Czech startups and innovative Czech companies. And we try to merge them with the foreign investors which we already had in the country. Um, foreign investments has been big topic for us last 30 years since the transition to open economy. We are a very export-oriented country. We have close ties to Germany, and our largest industry is automotive. So we are very much influenced by anything what's happening in the markets right now. And when I look at the relationship with Ukraine, there has always been some cooperation, some economic activity, but I think we have many opportunities now to build closer ties and stronger bonds, and create better supply chains also in the whole region. So thank you very much for having me here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Eva. I think what already the presentations of the panelists show up to now is that this unfortunate situation of the war in Ukraine puts an entirely new focus and entirely new perspective on how economic relations function between countries. We're going to deep dive into that later on when we will talk about what kind of FDI projects there will be and there are in the country, and also what kind of value chains might be effective. But before we do this, I would like to ask Bogdan Bogdanov, Executive Director of Investor Bulgaria, for his introductory statement. Mr. Bogdanov, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon from me as well. For me, it's a great pleasure to be here today and to present our investment agency, but not only that, to be among colleagues that we more or less share the same vision of unity, vision of cooperation, vision that can make our region, not only our region, but Europe in general, a better place to be and a safer place to be. Bulgarian Investment Agency, it's been out there for more than 30 years. It used to be part of the Ministry of Economy. Last year, we started a reconstruction of our country, which was postponed for years. And part of this reconstruction, we put a strategic focus on investments, but also on the Bulgarian startup ecosystem. As part of this transition, investment agency has been moved to a dedicated ministry now that we created end of last year, Ministry of Innovation and Growth. And under the Ministry of Innovation and Growth, we have from one side the investment agency, the agency for small and medium-sized companies, but also the European funding, the Bulgarian Bank for Development, and also part of venture capital ecosystem. The idea is to have under one place all the different institutions that can contribute in the long term in developing our economy. The agency has a very simple way forward. And the way forward is that we can be, and we have to be, closer to the existing ecosystem of investors in Bulgaria to understand better their business model, their needs, their challenges, and also to connect this ecosystem with the new investors that we are talking to now. And of course, as every other region or a country, we have certain priority sectors that we can see really adding value to the investors. Part of these are, of course, automotive sector, which is a great example of growth in Bulgaria. For less than 10 years, we managed to grow from 1% of GDP in the automotive sector to more than 11% of GDP today, with more than 70,000 people directly employed in the automotive sector. But besides that, we have a very strategic focus in the automotive sector, focusing on autonomous vehicles, battery production, but also electric vehicles. Among other sectors are mechatronics, electronics. We have also chemistry and biotech, and also sector which have been historically well developed in Bulgaria when we talk about microelectronics and also equipment for the semiconductor industry. These are one of the key strategic sectors which we are betting on, but at the same time, we are looking into the ecosystem. When an investor comes in Bulgaria, it becomes part of the ecosystem. And as part of this ecosystem, from one side, they have access to all the incentives that the government can provide, financial and non-financial ones, but also we are supporting the investors with their further development. Again, through the European funding, through the national funding, and just to give you an example of what our government did for the business in the last 6 months. Just in the last 6 months, with direct grants and subsidies to the business because of the situation we are now, the government dedicated more than 2.5 billion euros, which were directly focused to the business, covering utility expenses, covering fuel prices. We also make a cap now on the price of electricity in Bulgaria. Why? Because Bulgaria is a net exporter of electricity in the region, so we produce a lot more than we need. As you may know, Bulgaria was one of the first countries that the gas was completely stopped from Russia without any further notice. It has been just stopped. And now our government managed to develop a very strategic infrastructure, the interconnector with Greece, in less than 6 months, something that has not been done for 10 years. And here is the example how strong we can be together. And if we develop this regional cooperation, we can be more efficient, and it can be better not only for our country, but also for our region. And last but not least, we are really relying on cooperation. And when we are talking to investors, one of the major aspects is, again, I will repeat it, to become part of this ecosystem. And in the near future, one of the main focus should be first, shorter the investment cycle. So from average 6 months, which has been years ago, we recently managed to close an investment with a big US company in the medical sector for less than 8 weeks, which is a good example. This is the benchmark. In terms of our cooperation with Ukraine, we have a very strong connection from the past. There is a big Bulgarian-speaking diaspora in Ukraine. So language is very close. So when this horrible war started, we've seen people moving from Ukraine, but also businesses trying to move to Bulgaria. And maybe I will leave that to the next question, because there will be what measures we have undertaken to support the Ukrainian business, because we've been really proactive in that approach, signing contract with the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce under the investment agency so that we can create this relation in a solid way, and companies, people that are coming to Bulgaria, because they are forced to do that, to have the right access to resources, to the labor market, to our social system, even to the schools for their kids. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope we have a very open and frank discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bogdanov. Strong case. Next, I would like to ask Kieran Donahue, Global Head of Strategy, Policy and International Financial Services of the IDA Ireland, to give his statement.
Thank you, Achim, and good afternoon, everyone. I represent IDA Ireland, the Irish government's foreign direct investment agency. I'm very pleased to join you all at today's forum. In cooperation with our EU partners and the government of Ukraine, the Irish government has provided humanitarian and other support to Ukraine over the last 5 months and will continue to do so. Our thoughts and prayers are very much with the people of Ukraine at this tragic and difficult time. A few brief comments, if I may, about IDA Ireland. We were established more than 70 years ago. Our primary role is to attract foreign multinationals to locate in Ireland. We have constructed a portfolio of more than 1,700 companies over the last 70 years. These companies are drawn from a range of sectors: technology, life sciences, financial services, business services, etc. Over half of the portfolio are US multinationals, and the rest come from the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan, and China. The current direct trade and economic links between Ukraine and Ireland are quite modest, less than half of 1% in relation to merchandise trade, and a similar statistic for services. We did establish an embassy in Kiev in 2021, and we hope this will be the foundation upon which we will grow and develop. more bilateral economic, social, and cultural ties. We haven't seen any corporate relocations from Ukraine to Ireland in the first 5 months of the conflict. Today's panel, as Achim said, is about the changing face of foreign direct investment. So some brief introductory remarks about that topic from me. We have seen changes in foreign direct investment, but we've also seen a lot of continuity. So multinationals in their discussions with us continue to prioritize the importance of access to markets, access to skills, access to innovation, access to a stable public policy environment, and to an operating location that provides reasonable operating costs and reasonable taxation. Certainly in a post-COVID-19 context, we have seen some changes, especially the degree to which more and more companies are operating remotely, organizing their structures around the availability of key staff and their needs and wants. And we've also seen a move to more dispersed models, a very interesting development in a cross-border context. We've also seen a significant increase in an emphasis upon resilience, risk management, climate action, and the stability, capacity, and capability of operating locations, and increased interest in the public policies that underpin the operating environment. It's important to acknowledge that the risk ratings of up to 60 countries have been downgraded by analysts since February of this year, and that is beginning to shape investment decision-making by large global firms. The other two key areas where we've observed significant developments, and I won't go into them in detail at this phase of the discussion, is firstly around sentiment. So how the decision makers and multinationals feel about the operating environment and how that alters and shapes their psychology and their decision-making processes. And secondly, and even more interesting in some respects than sentiment, is narrative. It's the language that is now being used by senior decision makers when you're sitting in rooms having discussions with them about investment. So whereas multinationals traditionally would emphasize costs, emphasize profits, the benefits of locating in a particular jurisdiction, the economics, if you will, of the investment decision-making process, increasingly multinationals are now looking at everything through a geopolitical and geostrategic lens. And language like deglobalization, decoupling, friendshoring, strategic autonomy, the development of regional alliances and the reconfiguration of supply chains, that's become a much, much stronger feature of the conversations that we're having with them, and we suspect it will be a feature for the foreseeable future. So I'll leave it there for now. Again, great pleasure to join you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We already thank you. We already dived a little bit into the subjects, what kind of criteria there are for investments and what goes on in the background. And we know that businesses are, in most cases, pretty agnostic when it comes to political systems. In the end, profit is for many companies the main driver. And here we are emphasizing passion in business decisions and also highlighting the options to, in a changing world of value chains, to think about other countries maybe when reorganizing value chains and getting suppliers on board instead of the usual path which has been taken before the Russian war in the Ukraine. Mr. Sven Aulik is the next panelist, head of exports advisors team of the Estonian Business and Innovation Agency. Sven, I would like to ask you to take the floor.
Thank you, Achim. Actually, I would like to start with that it happened somehow that I'm the third Estonian on stage today already, and I was a little bit afraid that my colleagues, dear colleagues, have already told most of our good achievements and our messages. Luckily, I have some more. So please be patient. But before we reach that point, maybe a couple of words of Enterprise Estonia, which I represent. We are a very similar organization to Latvia, but very different from our Czech colleagues, that we are also having it under the same roof, our investment agency, our trade promotion agency, and tourism agency, plus a couple of more things. And in terms of sanctions and the situation currently in Estonia, we were lucky in a way that and the sanctions did not affect Estonia so much because already a couple of years ago we started to reduce our dependency on exports, especially to Russia, for example. And when the war broke out, we only from our exports, total 2% of our exports go to Russia. Of course, the other way, the imports is definitely the problem, and the supply chains have to be changed. But nevertheless, that is a good news. And of the official statistics, of course, it was mentioned already that inflation in Estonia this year has reached already 20% due to the events in Ukraine. There is something else on top of it that the reason that in Estonia it's a bit higher than the rest of the Europe. But the good news that this is still an economic growth, and it will grow also hopefully next year. And even our wages are growing quite well. So in overall, the economical situation in Estonia is quite good. And there is one more thing I want to say as an introduction. About Estonia, yes, that Estonia is actually known by the other name, and when we go to the trade fairs around the world, our slogan usually, our name of the country is not just Estonia, we are called E-Estonia, because Estonia is actually, and it's not the bragging thing, that it is the most digitally advanced country in the world with 99% of our governmental and private services being available online. There are, that's not a joke now, there are only two things you can't do in Estonia digitally. Can you think what are these two things? These two things are getting married. It's usually quite polite to show up on your wedding, right? So we do it traditional way. And getting divorced, that's another thing that lawyers, you want to make sure that the lawyers do the right decisions in the end. Technically, they're actually possible, but we keep this tradition alive. And why I'm talking about the Estonia is that we have been in long-term relations with Ukrainians already for around 20 years. And what my colleagues, Mr. Sutt mentioned, that we are helping them, and they are very advanced in digital. I must admit that the steps we started 20 years ago, when we started our e-journey, we started the cooperation with Ukrainians, and when the war broke off, we went even more farther away. So the backbone of Ukrainian digital government services are actually having Estonian origin, and we have given that to Ukrainians for free without any charging any fees for that. So we are really glad that our achievements have already reflected on the Ukrainian economy and helped a lot them during the war. And I'll stop in here at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sven. And it's a beauty to see a round of applause. It's a beauty. It's a beauty to see that already there are connections done in that case in the digital way how to cooperate with Ukraine. And speaking about Ukraine, I was gambling against the Zoom connection. I'm very happy Sergei Chivkach is still with us and the connection is holding. Sergei, do you hear us? I might have been slightly too optimistic about the sound connection.
He's trying hard.
Well, he's trying hard. He's typing. He's typing. Okay.
Who has the chat box open? Please translate.
Obviously, I'm in a wormhole here.
Achim. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, so good to hear you. Very good. I'm not sure if the sound was connected to your.
Me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Obviously, there's a long delay until the sound gets transported. And if you can hear us, I'm using the delay to ask the question, because if you look at Ukraine Invest, it would be great if you can give an introduction as a CEO of Ukraine Invest about your organization, and of course, although it might be obvious, give a brief picture about the current situation of foreign direct investments reaching and leaving the Ukraine from your perspective.
It's a translation of your speech.
I'm so happy it works.
Dear Achim, dear esteemed colleagues from investment promotion agencies, and dear organizers, thank you very much for this opportunity, to talk to you about other developments in Ukraine, about what we do. Just briefly about Ukraine Invest. We were established in 2016 and moved to a full-fledged state institution in 2019. Since then, we have managed to attract more than $5 billion to Ukraine, helped to develop regulatory policies, assisted investors, just doing all those things that you do for businesses in your countries as well. Ukraine in 2019-2020 did a lot of changes in terms of development of regulatory policy. Finally, investment incentives were introduced on a full scale in Ukraine. Ukraine Invest was designated as an institution that was responsible for attraction of investments according to that new scheme. A new scheme provided for up to 30% of state support for businesses that wanted to invest in specific sectors of the Ukrainian economy. So we have managed to gather together 28 projects for a total amount of $2 billion. And just before this illegal, unprovoked war started, we have submitted 3 applications for a total amount of over $150 million, and another $750 million in projects were about to submit it in March. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, but we are getting back there. Looking at the economy, Ukraine was well on its way for economic development in 2021. The level of FDIs in Ukraine was record-breaking in 2021, and it reached $61 billion. Now we will have to recover. Now we will have to get back on our path for economic development, and we're already doing that. Ukraine Invest has not stopped any operations since 24th of February 2022, when Ukraine was attacked. During this time, we were helping businesses to maintain operations in Ukraine where possible. We were supporting them when they were planning to relocate into the central or western parts of Ukraine. We were helping them to deal in difficult situations with any governmental authorities, and we have managed to resolve more than 70 serious, high-level issues for businesses during the war. So our team is devoted, is fully focused on support of development of Ukrainian economy. Why this event is important for us today? Because we need to speak about cooperation. Ukraine has shown to the whole world that we are a resilient country, not only because we protect our land, but because we protect businesses of Ukrainians, and we also protect businesses of foreign investors in Ukraine. So now we have to move to a next step, a step where we can plan our cooperation. There will be plenty of opportunities for private businesses in rebuilding of Ukraine. We are not asking for any one-way support. We are asking for a mutual beneficial cooperation between Ukraine, foreign companies, more resilient, and more reliable supply chains. I believe that investment is the language of peace, because when companies invest, when countries invest in each other, there will be no place of war. And I wish that this experience that happened to Ukraine will never be repeated anywhere throughout the world. Therefore, I'm counting on cooperation with our partners, and we have to think how to engage investors from throughout the world in our region specifically. I'm very happy to see my colleagues and partners from Estonia, Moldova, Czech Republic, from Ireland, from all other countries, because we need to think how to make this world better, more peaceful, and more resilient to challenges that we could never expect in 21st century. This is an opening statement, and I would like to answer any questions and participate in all other discussions that will follow.
There we go. Thank you, Sergey. Thank you very much for the statement, and taking your statement into account, and also the ones we heard from the panelists here. They all presented their service portfolio in one way or the other. And when we are looking at the situation in Ukraine and also in the adjacent countries, there's a lot of complexity going on, and investors, they might not be sure about how to proceed. If to proceed, and when, then where, and in which volume. So one of the major jobs all these investment and trade promotion agencies have, and they are executing it excellently, is to reduce complexity on the way to a country. And here we are in a special situation that we have to relieve, or we have to make the facts transparent to reduce the complexity. So the next question is about FDI projects. Maybe not individual projects, because this might be a sensitive issue for some companies, but let's talk about industries, and maybe that we have an idea about what scale there is in these industries. So I would be interested in what kind of industries and FDI projects connects your country with the Ukraine. This would be interesting to hear, so that we can have a kind of imagination, what kind of anchor points there are in the Ukraine and in the countries we are talking about. What kind of FDI projects connect your country with the Ukraine? I'd like to start with Stelian Manic.
Thank you. So in this way, I'll mention probably two things, two opportunities that arise because of this war. So to mention is that now Ukraine has really opened only the western border, and almost half of the border is today goes through Republic of Moldova. Another thing that I would like to mention here about the border is that more than half of that border is say on the eastern part of Moldova. We got Transnistria, that's a territory that is controlled by Russia. And now can you imagine the fact that now all these traffic goes through Moldova, goes through just several points. So in the first part of, say, when the war just started, that was a real nightmare on the borders. Okay, today the situation there is much better due to the very good cooperation between the Moldovan, Ukraine customs and Moldovan and Romanian customs. So talking about this opportunity, I would say that Republic of Moldova now can develop and become in the future a real transportation hub in the region. And be a very good corridor in the new situation, because even if we can imagine that tomorrow the war will stop, there is no any we cannot be sure that actually the Nikolaev, the Odessa ports and all other Ukrainian ports will be open, which means that the traffic will continue to go, a big part of the traffic will continue to go through Moldovan territory, which means that it's a very good opportunity to our country to become a logistic hub. And the investments in this sector today probably are very, very welcome. And the second thing that I'd like to say about is that the risk of the food supply in the world. Okay, so Moldova is a very, very big producer of different agricultural goods. But the issue is that we are exporting more of raw materials. So probably another big opportunity to invest in the Republic of Moldova due to the new condition of war is to invest in processing of agricultural goods. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So already the logistics can be a connecting factor, especially in border regions. And if you have a logistics center in one country, it's easy to migrate trade and even other logistic centers into the Ukraine in the end, so that you extend the network of your business and you provide more services. That's for the example of Moldova. I wonder, how is it in the Czech Republic?
Thank you. So I looked at the numbers what we have for FDIs together with between Czech Republic and Ukraine for both outbound and inbound investments. And from the history, there is one investment project from Ukraine in Czech Republic in financial services, and on the other way, there are 21 projects from Czech Republic in Ukraine, which can be seen as a small number, but considering the size of our country and also that we are mostly a receiver of FDI, then I think it's quite interesting. And even more interesting is the structure of the investments, because 40% of those investments went to renewable energies. Most of them were greenfield investments, but we also have companies who already successfully expanded in Ukraine. Most of them are located in the western part, near Kiev, but we have also quite a strong base of companies in the area of Dnipro. And I think that would be also great to in the future to grow this existing community of Czech companies and bring there more. Current war intensified the interest of investors in both countries. So Czech Invest currently talks to over 10 Ukrainian companies which are seriously considering investment in the Czech Republic. It's not, I wouldn't say it's really relocation, it's more like expanding their business because they keep their teams in Ukraine. And it's very surprising to see the type of companies because they are very innovative. Coming from industries like gaming, healthcare, engineering. So we try to help them to get the right partners, to connect to universities and introduce to the community. Then we also support not only large Ukrainian businesses, but also small ones. We accepted around over 300,000 people coming from Ukraine, and some of them had small businesses in Ukraine which they want to continue. So we try to also support them with some legal, explaining the legal framework in the Czech Republic, help them to start a business and also connect to local community in different regions. And as I already mentioned, we are also looking at startups, and Czech Invest is part of European Startup Network, which is about to launch a new program to support Ukrainian startups, where every startup can get 60,000 euro for the start, and also many many business support from mentors. And Czech Republic would like to be part of it and involve Ukrainian startups in our incubation programs. When we talk about the outbound investments, we really see enormous interest among Czech companies. We created Business Club Ukraine, And we already now have around 150 interested companies interested in exporting, but also investing in Ukraine, not only waiting for when the war is over, but really working on the business plans and on some connections already now. So I think it will be really interesting to see what the future brings, but I'm sure that the business and investments will be way stronger in the future.
Thank you, Eva. And already what I hear are three, well, more than three, but three main aspects. The first aspect is, as many countries aim for multinational companies, large companies, maybe 90% of the business in foreign direct investment is small and medium-sized enterprises. They keep the machines running, and they keep also the economy running, and this is our main businesses. You do this at Czech Invest, you're probably everyone does it here on the panel. You just named it on the one hand. On the other hand is that you already highlighted the importance of green economy. Green economy is probably something which everyone has to adopt in their economies, but now there's the opportunity to build stronger bonds in developing green economy, especially when building up Ukraine. And the third thing is, I think you did already what was mentioned earlier on the panels today, to get into business now, to build FDI relations now, to have a good platform to build upon that in the future. So thank you, Eva, for that. What kind of FDI bonds are there between Estonia and Ukraine, Sven?
I think in my opening words, I already mentioned the digital side, the digital sector. If we go a little bit deeper, then when I look at my notes, that what this has already been done and is on place is a digital signature platform, electronic court system, different registries. These are already working. On top of that, we are also working very heavily with the education, digitalization of education, because children can't have a proper school education in current conditions. And we learned that when I was preparing that there has been already in educational side 15 technical platforms translated to Ukrainian language. So we didn't just copy-pasted everything, but we adapted it to Ukrainian children needs. So that is the digital side, and that will definitely continue. And in here, we definitely would like to cooperate with the other countries who can provide such services which are suitable for Ukrainian environment. On the other side, we have a long-term relationship with Ukrainians on the construction side, and because Estonia is actually known in Europe as one of the biggest modular and element and prefabricated houses producer out of wood. I spoke to somebody already here in the audience who is dealing with also the polyurethane-based modular houses. We are doing it on a very sustainable way of the wood. We are one of the biggest suppliers in Europe, and it is the first project. It was already mentioned by my colleagues already, is the kindergarten. But the opportunities of this and what was already mentioned, it's the fastest way that with this type of housing and municipal building, we can build up the things within weeks. We can put up some schools, some hospitals, some official buildings, and of course the buildings for people who have lost their homes. So we just need basically some kind of foundation, and we either ship it over. It was also mentioned that our business delegation already has been in Ukraine, checking out the possibilities to actually set up the production facilities in Ukraine, not just to ship it over from Estonia, but start producing something locally in the Zhytomyr area, which is our home oblast in Ukraine. So that's the third thing we are currently working with in Ukraine.
Thank you, Sven. I understand that already what you just mentioned goes ways beyond traditional work of an investment or trade promotion agency. You're dealing with subjects which are closer connected to the economy by promoting, for example, these housing projects.
Yeah, we are working very closely together with our Minister of Foreign Affairs and the STEV organization, which Katri Masik is representing. So we have agreed in Estonia that there is a single contact point is actually there, and we are supporting them with the help from the business and actual company side. So whenever they have reached an agreement on the political and municipal level, whatever there is, we can come in and then just put it into implementation very quickly.
Makes sense. Thank you. Kieran, what is your opinion on that, on the FDIs? The microphone has to travel back. Okay. There we go.
Thanks for the question, Achim. So firstly, I should say that we in IDA Ireland would be happy and honoured to partner with Ukraine Invest to support their contribution to the reconstruction of their country in any way we can. And we look forward to the time when we will both be actively engaged in that project. As I said in my opening remarks, there are very few economic and trade ties between Ukraine and Ireland at the moment, and equally few foreign direct investment ties. We haven't seen any corporate relocations from Ukraine to Ireland, and that's actually a good thing. We would prefer if Ukrainian firms relocated within Ukraine or to the nearby neighboring countries. Some of our clients that have relocated have actually relocated from Ukraine to, say, Poland or nearby, which is good because it raises the prospects for those companies to return to Ukraine after the conflict. When I think about maybe sectors or activities of foreign direct investment that we have some exposure to that we believe that could play a role in helping to reconstruct Ukraine in the not too distant future. I think about technology as one sector, one activity, in part because while they're not multinational firms and they're not in our portfolio, there are at least 100 small and medium-sized Irish-owned companies that before the conflict had remote ICT teams doing software development work for them to help their business, but based in Ukraine. That's a very, very significant development. Understandably, those remote teams now are no longer present, but the intention of those Irish companies would be to reactivate those remote technical teams when the conflict ends. Ukraine is highly valued for the quality of its graduates, of its people, and of its technical talent. I think other subsectors would be cybersecurity, data and analytics, sensors, and everything to do with defense and security. We are already seeing expanding order books in the defense and security sector and various subsectors, and that will be a growth area in the future as well. So whether you look at it at a sectoral or subsectoral or activity level, there are numerous channels through which Ukraine can capture foreign direct investment in the future and leverage that investment to help rebuild the nation.
Thanks. Thanks. What's particularly fascinating listening is that you already have a matrix where you can connect products and services in cooperation with Ukraine, which is practically an excellent basis for building up business now and later on. Ms. Iveta Strupkaya, Deputy Director, Charter of Export Investment Development Agency, Latvia, could you give us your opinion about FDI connections between your country and Ukraine?
Yes, I think that Latvia's story will be very similar to Estonia's. And of course, Ukraine has been an important and long-standing partner for Latvia. And our ties have become even stronger in recent years. And if we are talking about investment, over the previous years, investment gradually increased both ways. Actually, the cumulative FDI is not measurable in billion euros, but the tendency is increasing. And of course, we concentrate mostly on sectors which I already mentioned, including ICT. And even before war started, we worked with several projects in ICT sector and also in other sectors. And of course, we understand very well that we can offer good conditions and services, incentives for relocation, but we understand very well that these companies, they are ready to relocate for exact time period and not forever, because all the efforts will be needed to rebuild the economy of Ukraine. And yeah, as to trade, Ukraine is also an important trade partner for Latvia. And during this time period, we we cooperate with Ukraine in different sectors, including education, including healthcare. For example, our specialists from Rehabilitation Center have started an online course for Ukraine medical personnel on rehabilitation practices. And yeah, talking about investment in Ukraine, there is an initiative from Latvian company to share experience and invest in projects which involve the use of peat in energy production in Ukraine. And also there is interest in developing production sites for producing modular houses. Colleague from Estonia also mentioned this, but actually we have really high competence in this sector in Latvia and also in Estonia. Yeah, what else? Of course, Latvia welcome Ukrainian business by offering its friendly startup ecosystem and environment and cooperation with academia, with innovative companies. And as to investment projects, we apply so-called fast-track approach to every project that comes from Ukraine. And we started with discussion about transport and logistics. And yeah, if I may, I would add one more comment or maybe a case. There have been discussion and specific proposals to use EU funding to connect Ukraine to Rail Baltic through Lviv and Warsaw, which would connect it further to Scandinavia in the north. And I think that for economic cooperation and closer integration, this might be a great project.
It is indeed. Now, even if we mention digitalization twice or three times, if we mention housing 3 times, 4 times, this is an advantage here. The redundancy is our friend, because the more we can offer, the more cooperation dots we have, the better it is for helping the Ukraine in the end. Next would be Mr. Bogdanov. May I ask to give your statement?
Of course, before giving you some practical examples from the last months with Ukrainian companies, we need to discuss how FDI actually works. In general, you need stability. So one of the first aspects we are focusing on a government level is how we can secure stability in terms of financial stability, political, etc. So from financial point of view, that was one of the key focuses in the moment, because expenses of the government are huge. We need to cover different gaps in few months. And although there were a lot of subsidies to the companies that are operating in Bulgaria, there were a lot of money that has been spent for the people. And at the same time, we managed to be the second lowest in terms of debt to GDP ratio in Europe, in European Union. At the same time, we said, okay, those companies to operate, they need financing. So up to 2027, we managed to secure roughly 15 billion euros, which will be dedicated to different projects, including startups. And also redundancy of our electricity system was another topic. How we can secure the electricity supply once we see that there is a huge issue that we had with the gas. Luckily, we managed to have alternative source of the gas now, and 1/3 of our gas is secured. But at the same time, we will develop a critical infrastructure in Bulgaria in terms of energy storage system. So it will be 6,000 megawatt hours. It's a huge amount of energy storage, which will be developed in the next 3 years. And also, we had even discussion with the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, how we can use our seaports in Burgas and Varna actually to support in terms of logistics. One of the latest announcements that we made during the 3Cs initiative in Riga not long time ago was that actually Burgas port will be expanded with a new terminal for containers. And all of these measures are actually backing the initiatives of the government to support and to have sustainable FDI in the country, regardless from where it comes from, or regardless if the company would like to expand in Bulgaria. And then how that applies to the Ukrainian companies or people that are forced to be relocated out of their country. And we started receiving requests from different Ukrainian companies, and actually, especially in the IT sector, We've been very tightly connected. The Bulgarian IT ecosystem has been working a lot with Ukrainian IT ecosystem. And naturally, after this conflict started, those partners that have been working for years together, some of them, they came to Bulgaria. But even when we received the first inquiries from those companies to relocate, some of them, they had more than 1,000 people, to relocate them in Bulgaria, we a little bit broader our perspective, because it's not just the company, it's not just the FDI, it's not just the money, it's the people that stand behind. And we said, okay, if we have 1,000 people coming in, we did the analysis together with the company to see how many of them are kids, how old are they, what they need, what kind of social security they need, how their parents can get access to the labor market in Bulgaria. We did that analysis, and just to give you an example, from initially a procedure that takes several months for you to get a permission to work in Bulgaria, for Ukrainian citizens, we made that, right now it's 1 week to get a permission to work. On the other aspect, we said, okay, but let's think about the children. And do you know that there is a different vaccination procedures in Ukraine and in Bulgaria? I don't know how it's in the other European countries, but by law, Ukrainian children were not allowed to go to the Bulgarian schools because actually they don't have the same vaccination. And we said, okay, let's think about the ways how we can actually overcome that. And that was a solution that was implemented. On another hand, those Ukrainian companies, again, a big part of them are in the IT sector, but also we have some service companies that originally had their offices in Bulgaria and in Ukraine. They actually managed to sustain their business, expanding their Bulgarian offices and being able to continue their business as normal as it could be in that situation. And what else we did proactively, we said, let's contact with the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, and we organized a roundtable for the Ukrainian companies, some of them that were in Bulgaria, but some of them they were still not relocated, or they were looking for different solutions. So we organized a roundtable that gathered people from different institutions in Bulgaria. So it was very informative what and how we can do it together. And the last step that we undertake, having these IT partnerships that were established and running before, we said now what we can do for these companies, for those projects to get sustainable and to continue with their innovations, because actually we're talking about innovations here. This was not announced yet, but what we are doing at the moment, together with our ecosystem, with the Bulgarian FinTech cluster and the Invest Bulgarian agency will be coordinator of this project. We are raising 20 million euros, which will be dedicated to mixed partnerships between Ukrainian and Bulgarian companies, or Ukrainian companies that are now operating in Bulgaria, doing research and development. And this should be secured also, part of it through European financing, part of it through national financing. We really want to act as partners here, and we are really looking into long-term how we can support. But again, it's not just the companies, it's the people that need also to be supported. And in the future, of course, hopefully that we went soon, that situation with the war, we went soon. We are also looking further how we can support maybe relocating back that companies to Ukraine, but also trying to help Bulgarian ecosystem be part of the future reconstruction of the country and be part to operate locally, even in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I understood that one aspect of your support is also to, of course, to help Ukrainian companies in Bulgaria on the one hand, but also to help them to go back to Ukraine. And I think this is a very important factor in the whole picture. That on the one hand, we can support Ukrainian companies by giving them the market, by helping them entering the local market, and thus stabilizing the companies and stabilizing the economy in Ukraine. And on the other hand, giving them also the opportunity to go back, since they will be strong enough to explore their own market again, and maybe also other markets. I would like to go to Sergey again. Hopefully you can hear us. I'll just gonna continue to talk, taking into account that there's a delay until the sound reaches you. I would be interested in, I don't know if it's a good question, but it would be interested in your wish list. What you wish these investment and trade promotion agencies present here, what do you wish them to emphasize on in their work when it comes to cooperation with Ukraine?